Hello everyone, I am Anubhab Ghosh and welcome to another Unity session. Now that you have a taste of what kind of things we can do with Unity, today we will just show you some very basic things about materials and textures and making objects look realistic. So before starting the video, I have created a new project in Unity like we have already shown in previous sessions. Then I have gone to Window and Package Manager, and I have selected the post-processing package and installed it. You can install it by clicking the button here, the install button. It will appear instead of remove. And I have also installed the Pro Builder package. Same, you'll get the install button here. I have already installed them to save some time. Now you probably already know this, but to move around, to look around, you can press and hold the right mouse button and move your mouse to look around. And like an FPS, if you press WASD, you can move around the scene just like a normal game. Now you can also hold shift to move faster, and if you are not holding the right mouse button, you in normal mode you can use the mouse, scroll the mouse wheel to zoom in and zoom out. Okay, so you can select objects by clicking as you expect. Now you can also select objects from a list in the hierarchy. This does the same thing basically. And when an object is selected, if you press the F button on your keyboard, it will be focused and it will be at the center of your screen like this. Now when you have selected an object, in Unity, every one of these objects is called a game object. Each of them has a name which you can change here. So I only have one camera, I can just call it camera. And each of these objects have a set of components. These are behaviors that this object actually has. So in case of this camera object, for example, we have a transform which determines its position on the screen. You can change these values to move the camera. And let's reset it. And there is this camera component. This is the actual behavior of this determines the actual behavior of this object. If this component is there, then this object will act like a camera. If it is not there, then it will no longer act like a camera. Now none of these objects are special. We can just create an empty object anywhere on the screen and make it anything. For example, here I added an empty game object, and now I can click on this add component button and add any component that I want. Say I want to make this thing a light, so I just search for light, and now it's a light, it's a point light. And we'll talk about different types of lights later, but it just behaves like a light now. If you remove this component, it's just a blank object. Now you can make it anything else you want. Now you can right click and delete objects, or you can just press a delete button on your keyboard. So let's start by making some materials. So to make a scene, let's first start with the plane. I'm gonna go to this plus button here under hierarchy to add a new object. Then I'm gonna go to 3D object and click plane. This will create a plane object. This is basically just a normal object with a mesh renderer attached and a mesh filter attached. So a mesh renderer will actually render the mesh, that is draw the mesh on screen, and mesh filter tells it exactly what kind of object to draw. So here it says plane, so it will draw a plane. If I say add another object, let's say it's a cube. In case of cube, there will be a cube object. This mesh filter actually supplies the shape of the object in terms of a mesh. A mesh is like a 3D shape with some vertexes and edges. You will learn more about meshes in the next session, the Blender session. Anyway, this is 3D shape with the special structure. This is like a geometrical thing. So any 3D object will have a mesh, and it is and this mesh filter component will supply the actual mesh that has to be drawn, and mesh renderer does the actual job of drawing that object. So here it has specific options of exactly how to draw it, so you can maybe turn off shadows and things like that. So we'll explore them more. So first let's delete this mesh for now. So I'm just gonna go and click delete, and now we have this plane. Now as we have already seen, these are the controls. You can this is the move tool, the second one. While this is selected, you get three arrows which you can use to move this object in space. And this is the rotate tool, which you can rotate, and this is the scale tool, and so on. You can scale things. This is the 2D tool, which we will not be using here, and this is a combine transform tool, which you can use it to do all of this at the same time. You can move, rotate, scale and rotate. And this scaling at this axis will not do anything because the plane has like 0 height. So scaling it is multiplying 0 by something is always still 0. Okay, so let's stick to the move tool for now, because we won't be needing any of this for now. Now your scene can be seen in multiple different it can be during editing you can see it in different ways. For example, by default Unity starts in shaded mode, where you will see this is like the final look of your object that you can see during playing the game. Now if you want to see what exactly it is made of, you can go to the wireframe mode. Here you can see each of these triangles. I'm not sure if this will be visible in the video very well, but here you can see all of the triangles that make up the shape of that object. And if you go to shaded wireframe, you can actually see both of them. You can actually see the final look of the object. At the same time, you can also see the triangles that make it up. So this is kind of useful, but for now shading will be just fine for us. Now when you add a new object, it is created at a random location. So you should not like have objects at random locations. You should keep them organized. So here you can see the coordinate of that object, and let's move it back to the origin. So there are many ways to do that. You can just manually type 0 at every coordinate, or you can just take the shortcut by clicking this button here and resetting this component to default values. See, they all become 0. Anyway, so now let's try to have some experiment on this plane by assigning different materials and stuff. So if you look at this mesh renderer component of this plane, you will see it has a material. It actually has an array of materials. Some objects will have multiple materials, so then you can change the size of this, but for this mesh we have only one type of material we are using. So what is a material? A material is it describes how a surface looks. So for any 3D object in your scene, its surface will have some kind of color properties, or it has something that defines how light will interact with it. So for example, a metal looks very different from wood, and every surface has some different properties. A material captures that. So if you double click on this, you will not actually see anything because it has not been assigned any material yet. It still has the Unity's default material, which looks this grayish boring color, and you can see this explore this material here, but you cannot change anything here because they are fixed in the default material. So let's have our own material. If you go to create, and if you this is your project window where it has all the stuff that makes up your game, for example meshes, textures, image, everything. So let's create a new material as part of the game, and let's call it our experiment material. Experiment, that's good enough. Now I'm gonna organize it by creating a materials folder. It's like a good practice, and I'm gonna drag it inside that materials folder to make it part of it. Oh, by the way, if you start a new project, you might have your project window might look something like this. It might have 2 columns. It might look something like this. So this is essentially the same thing, but I find it more convenient to have a smaller window here at the side, and 1 column is enough for seeing everything here. So you may find it more useful, but it depends on your preference. Anyway, so let's assign this material to this surface. This surface is still using the default material. Let's try to assign this experimental material here. So there are like many ways to do this. For example, you can drag it here. That is one way, or you can click this button and select the experimental material from here, or the best way is you can just directly drag it on the object itself. And yes, it's set here. Now once it is set, you will find that suddenly these options are editable now, and you can also edit the original material from here also. So let's actually, you can edit from anywhere, so I'm just gonna edit from here, from the meshes under the plain objects inspector. So first of all, a material has a type of shader. A shader is a small part of code that runs on your graphics card, and it determines how the surface will look. It lets you basically program it. So we'll not write our own code in this session because Unity already provides very decent ready-made code, shader code for this. So we'll here use the normal standard shader, not the specular one, the standard shader. Sorry, this one actually collapses and expands it. Anyway, so first is the albedo parameter. The albedo determines the color of your surface, the diffuse color of your surface. So diffuse color is the color that you get when you shine a light on an object, and this light is reflected to all different directions. And this is the color you get this is the color you get to see from any direction. So let's try to set a color. Oh, sorry. Oh yeah, so let's set any color, and as you can see, it kind of appears here. Now I have turned lighting off, that is why the surface looks kind of boring, I guess. So this button turns on lighting and turns it off. So you might see this light blue flashing sometimes. That is because the new shader is being compiled for a different system. When we make some changes, sometimes shaders need to be compiled again. Anyway, so as you can see, this surface does not really look that interesting yet. Okay, so another interesting thing is when you rotate an object like this, it's the arrows associated with the movement also gets rotated. And you can see this better here, the arrows are getting rotated, so that's kind of a bit harder to work with. So you can click this button so that we will see the global arrows. Global means that they will not be affected by rotation of the object. This is in the global coordinate space opposed to the local coordinate space of that object, if you understand that. Right? This simple way to think is that this will not affect the rotations, and this is the now the light is not yet shining directly on the surface. This is a directional light and it has a direction here. So if you rotate it slightly, it might have better angle, so the surface will be more lit. So that if the light is directly shining directly on the surface, then the brightness it will be appear more bright as you expect in real life. So this material is kind of boring because it looks same from every angle, right? I mean, because we have only defined this albedo. Now there is second button is for metallic, whether this metal or whether this surface is metal or non-metal. So in real life we only have metals and non-metals. There is usually not much in between, so you will either want to set it 1 or 0. So let's first go in non-metal. The third parameter is smoothness. So you have probably seen that most surfaces are not perfectly smooth. For example, a shiny polished wooden floor is smooth, but a normal cement wall is not that smooth. So if you make it if you turn up the smoothness, then this thing you see, this bright spot, is called a specular highlight. So this is the point where your light gets directly reflected to your eye from the normal, using the normal reflection raw. So if you have a more smooth material, this point will be smaller but its intensity will be higher, and if you have a less smooth material, the point will be larger and larger and finally just spread throughout the whole surface, but its intensity will fall, as you can see. Now the rest of the parameters we'll explain later. So let's talk about metals now. If you make it metallic, then it looks like this. Now if you increase the smoothness, and it has this bright spot, but this time you can see that the rest of the area appears much darker than in the non-metal case. This is a property of the metals, and I'll show you a better example here. As you go to a more metallic scene, as you increase the metallic value, the surface appears more reflective, and it preserves the reflection instead of making it a plain single color. And this is a property of all metals. You have seen metals are more shiny and they are better at reflecting objects. And the smoothness value, as you increase it, the reflection will get sharper and sharper, and the highlight will also get sharper to a point. And if you decrease it, then this spot will increase in size and decrease in brightness, and same goes for the non-metals. This is the official unity chart actually. Anyway, this also has some sample colors for different materials, albedo values. Now let's try some textures on it. So as you can see, these have some interesting empty boxes. So let's see what we can do about them. So for this we'll need some textures. So we can download some from these websites. This is 660textures.com. They give you free to use textures for any purpose really, and I have already downloaded a couple of textures. So let's get them into Unity. So these are the textures. So they come in zip files, and if you extract them, you will find these files. So each of this is a texture for a different purpose. This is the color and this is what a normal map looks like, and I will explain later what they do. Metalness and displacement roughness, you'll see. uh, so so let's import these things. So you have got this folder. Let's create a texture folder here. Texture size, and you can drag this whole folder inside it to import it. That folder was created in the wrong place, so I'm just gonna drag it inside the textures folder. Yeah, that's fine. So let's actually create a new material for this thing too. You can have as many materials as you want for different kind of surfaces. So we're gonna call this, I guess, diamond plate for some reason. This is known as diamond plate. I love this surface, by the way, the look of it. You can see them on trains and stuff. Anyway, so I'm gonna drag this here, and this material is now applied. This is the default copy of copy of the default material, so there is nothing special about it yet. Now we attach these textures to it. So first thing you can attach is the color. So you see this first channel, albedo channel here. Oh, by the way, I have not said this, but there are this rendering modes. These allowed you to have transparent objects, and actually we'll show it later. So let's drag the color thing and you directly put it into albedo. So color is for albedo, and yeah, you can see this thing kind of. I'm gonna keep it at 0 for now. Yeah. So let's add the next thing, that is the metalness. So this is a fully, you will think this is a fully metallic surface, but this is actually not, because there are like certain rust and other things, dirt and everything on top of it. So some parts will be metallic, some parts will be non-metallic. So to fix that, you can use this metalness map. So on the color map, just each pixel just shows the color at that pixel. This is very not like normal image. But on metalness map, the white values indicate that this part is very metallic, and black parts indicate that this part is not metallic, and gray values indicate like medium values. So let's track that here. Sorry, oops, didn't mean to do that. Undo it. Here we want to drag it in the metallic slot, metalness. Yeah, and let it compile for a while, and that's also not what I expected, I guess. Yeah, smoothness. So we have a roughness map, and if you do 1 minus roughness, you get the smoothness basically. But it's kind of slightly more complicated here, because this value is taken from either metallic channels alpha value, metallic albedo textures alpha value, or metallic textures alpha value. So this is a complicated way you have to assign this to this. You have to basically put this smoothness texture as part of one of these textures, and this is more complicated to do. We'll need a separate software like GIMP or Photoshop to do this, so I'm not gonna do this here in this session. We can talk about it later if we want in the meet. So let's try the other maps. So normal map is it basically says which pixels, like just like a normal photo, unlike a normal photo, at each pixel this colors indicate some special thing. So at each pixel the color tells the direction of the surface is normal on it. So a normal is like a perpendicular vector to the surface. So at each pixel this value specifies the color. So blue is like the y-axis, the directly top axis from the surface, and red specifies the x-axis and green specifies the z-axis. This is you can see this that this part of it. How do I zoom it? Actually, let me find the original image. So as you can see, this part is red, but this part has very little red. This is because the normal at this point is has a higher positive value in the x-axis, and this one has negative value in the x-axis, this part. So that's how this normal data is encoded. And the blue, very normal bluey parts are almost perpendicular to the surface. So we're gonna apply that. Let's try that. Let's see what happens. And yeah, now the fun thing starts. Actually, let me increase the smoothness a little bit. It will be better if we could use this actual roughness value, but it'll be more work right now. So here now, if you see one thing, if I disable, actually here first thing you see is this texture is not marked as a normal map. You can click this fix now button. So what if you can just directly click it, or you can manually do it, which is I'm going to show you right now. So if you click on normal texture, each texture in Unity has some parameter associated with it, some options. So you want to here you want to change the texture type from default to normal map, which is a normal map, and that will fix the one that will fix the problem. Let's apply. Now is the fun part. If you let's disable this thing and look at this. As you can see, this looks like a vague white spot like thing, but once you put this normal map, let it yeah, then it suddenly looks like a more 3D surface. That is because the normal map has the information of the normal vector at each point on the surface, so it can be used in light calculation to more accurately calculate in which direction light will bounce off it. This is even more prevalent if you have a very reflective kind of surface, which we'll show when we discuss different types of lights. Okay, so do we have anything interesting in the material anymore? And there is a height map, and we also have a displacement map for this. This basically tells the height of each point at the surface. So you can see these white parts are basically raised from the black parts are below the average level, and white parts is above the white level. This basically tells the height at that point. And let's assign that to displacement is height map. And yeah, now our texture is kind of ready to be used. Now I will recommend to not actually use all of them in game, because the performance will degrade as you use more extra features. So usually I use albedo and normal map only and avoid normal metallic and height map, but if you target a good computer with better graphics, then go for it, I guess. Now is there anything else? Okay, so occlusion basically says which parts are kind of covered by other geometry, and it's kind of dark, and it's kind of like the occlusion effect that you get in post-processing, but for even smaller parts in texture. From will not gonna use that. And emission is kind of interesting, so I can show that. Let's actually add a different object for this. Let's add a sphere. Let's reset its position. You can also click the reset position button, and let's move it up. So right now it has the default material. Let's replace that with the diamond plate material. Sorry, I mean the experiment material. Now in the experimental options, let's have a emission. So I'm gonna make this less smooth so that we can actually see this effect better. Now let's set a color. Let's pick a color. Now you can set any color if you like. Let's say I set this color. Now this material will glow even without light. This material basically emits light. So if I turn off this light, set intensity to 0, yeah, now everything is dark except that sphere. It's still lit, it's still glowing. Basically it emits light even in the absence of other light sources. So that's like that, and there are some secondary detail options, like these detail maps are, for example, used to add extra detail, some marks or other things that will be hidden, that will not be visible if you look at it from far, but will be visible when you are very close to the object, and will not use them. These are more advanced options that you can try. Reflections also we should see. So this moods. So let's actually use the sphere for this. Unfortunately we do not have an alpha texture, but let's see. First let's try with transparent, and let's set its albedo value to something like and I have to first turn off emissions don't work with emissions don't work well with transparency. Now if you change this alpha value here, if you increase this, it will be more opaque. Let's use the game view for this actually, because there's a lot of distraction here. Where's the camera? Let's take it closer. Yeah. Now this is fully opaque, and if you reduce it, you can see through this object, and it will be transparent, fully transparent when you set it to 0. Okay, so, and there are other modes. This cutout is interesting, but I don't really have something to show. So when you use a texture for albedo, you can have a alpha channel which determines which parts of this object are like visible and which part of this object is transparent, and cutout will let you like cut off at a point, and all the points which have lesser alpha value than this value will disappear. So if I try to go beyond this, and it will suddenly disappear. And this is more useful the texture, so you cannot really show it here. Okay, so let's try different lights now. Let's make another material for this part, or this is enough. Okay, so first I'm gonna disable this light entirely. Actually it's easier to just uncheck this. So as you can see, the scene looks a bit dark. So if you go to window and rendering and lighting settings, you will get this window. Let's put it here, not here, really here. Yeah, so this is a past scene setting. This is global to the whole scene. Let me save it actually. So at the top level is the skybox. This determines your sky, how the sky looks. Let's make a skybox. If you go to create, and it should be somewhere here. Oh, it's actually part of material, I think. Let's make sky material and put it inside this material folder. And sky boxes have some special options, so you have to use a special shader for this. If you go to standard and search for sky, you'll get this mobile skybox shader, but I want the normal one, procedural. Yeah, this is what you want. And this already looks like the default one, so actually let's drag this one here. Okay, so can you actually see any sun here? There does not appear to be any sun because we have not set a sun here yet. So we have to select a light as sun. Our light is currently disabled, so let's first enable that. And you should be able to see the sun, I think, or maybe it's let's open this material options here. Yeah, the sun is definitely there, but yeah, now I found it. So the shine should be set to pretty small values, not that small. Around this, I guess, maybe a little bit bigger. No, not that big. Yeah. So this skybox will automatically use a program to generate how the sky looks like, and you can play around with these options like amount of light. And I don't really understand how sky works physically, so can't say much, but yeah, you can make it night, day or something. And but another option you can try is, instead of using this procedural skybox, you can use a HDRI. So you can get free HDRIs from this site, hdrievent.com. I have already downloaded one, so let me import that. These files are, they have different extensions. This one is EXR. Sometimes you will also get .hdr. Anyway, this is important. So let's try to apply it. We go to the lighting settings. Instead, this time we'll have to change the sky shader from procedural to a normal HDRI. So you go to panoramic, then you put this HDRI here, and there you have it, a complete sky. Now this photo admittedly looks terrible. It is just 1K, and I have downloaded a very low resolution version of it and used it, but you can download higher resolution versions if you like. For example, here you can get, these files can get pretty big, from 1.6 MB to 371 MB, so keep that in mind. I just downloaded the smallest version, but you can maybe go with 2K or 4K. Yeah, so this light will actually affect your scene if you change the actually not yet, you have to turn on lighting for that. For now, let's just have it at the default value. You can rotate this thing, obviously, and there is not much to do here, really. Now let's explore different kind of lighting options you have. So first we have is backlighting. In this, actually let's show the lights first. This here, the default light is a directional light. It's like sun. All of the rays of this light will appear parallel to each other, so they come from a single direction. Now let's actually set it to real time so you can see. Let's actually add also a cube to show exactly how the light behaves. I'm sorry, you can see the shadow of this cube here. Let me set it to 0.5. So this is perfectly on the ground. One thing you will notice is that the shadow is not perfectly aligned, and this is a problem with computer graphics in general. Well, not computer graphics, this kind of real-time game engine, that all games will have this problem, and you can try to fix it, and I'll show you. So let's op so this is the type of the light. For now we have selected directional. Color determines color, obviously. Then we have real time. We'll talk about other modes later. The real time means it will be drawn, the lighting will be calculated every frame, every second, if the game is running at 60 frames per second, it will be calculated 60 times per second. Then we have intensity. That will, that sets the intensity of the light, obviously. And another thing is, you can have a default brightness without even any lights. You can have some default light state here, so that some objects are still receive somewhat light. It is called an ambient light. In absence of any other light, this brightness will be used, but we'll not use it here. Also, this color can come from the skybox itself, this skybox. Now let's turn on this light. Now the shadow is like, there are many different types of shadow. You can obviously have no shadow, but you can also have hard shadow. In case of hard shadow, this line is kind of like a sharp line, but in case of soft shadow, it will be blurred. Now let's actually use the hard shadow because it's easier to see. Here you can see this glitch kind of thing. Now you can change this bias value to kind of fix that, but it can cause other issues later on, and you will see sometimes that this plane will cast shadow on itself, and that kind of issues will happen. These are also some values to tweak it to make it look better. And soft shadow is softer, and the glitch still remains a bit. Yeah, you can see this. I don't know if you can see this, but there are some lines appearing because I have turned the bias way too low. If you slightly increase it, they will disappear slowly. Yeah. Now the next kind of light is let's actually add another light object, point light. Actually, let's reset it to the default location. Yeah, now you can see the point light appearing on this object here. Actually, I'm gonna reduce this light's brightness so you can see it. 0.2. Now you can see this is the point light. See, this light is affecting everything. So point lights are like normal light bulbs or something, that the light source emit light in all directions in 3D space. So they have a range. If the range is lower, say 1 meter, then it will not affect anything further than that. Let's have 5 meters of range. They have color and everything just like before. Then there's this mode, and you will see this real-time indirect bounce shadowing is not supported for point and spotlights, and you don't need to worry about it for now. So you can have some shadow from it, hard shadows. Yeah, it's slightly visible if you can see here this line, and everything is basically same. Now there is another kind of light. I'm just gonna change it to spotlight. Spotlights are interesting because they appear like this. They appear like a normal spotlight. Let's have somewhat higher intensity for this one. Sky. I think you can see it, but yeah, this light will appear like a spotlight, and this is basically same as the normal point light, but in a single direction. And you can change the spot angle to make the spot larger or smaller, change the range, and every other option is basically same. Now we'll for now return to the point light case. Let's set the global. Now another thing you might be wondering is, where are the reflections? So reflections are a bit tricky to get right. First, let me make this a little bit more brighter. Oh, one thing, these are kind of too big, so let's fix that. No, that's too small. This is good enough. Yeah. So one thing, we want to have we can actually see this light itself getting reflected. If you set it intensity 1, you can kind of see the highlight from this light. You can see that some players are like bright, that is basically the specular highlight from that point, but you can't really, actually this will be better visible if I make it more smooth. Yeah, now you can see this part is reflecting light very well, so there is some kind of light reflection going to your eye, but not the kind of reflection you see in mirror. So where is that? So the easiest way to achieve it would be to use the post-processing filter actually. So let's do that. We have to add a post-processing layer to the camera. So you go to select the camera, go to add component and search for post-processing, and you get this layer, and you have a new post-processed layer object, and then you have to create a post-processing volume where we'll actually specify what effects you want to apply. So let's have it at 000. The position does not really matter here. And we create a volume. So this volume will by default apply to all objects in the scene, so we'll make it global, and we have to set all the settings in a profile, and there is none already, so let's create a new one. And if you do that, you should see this appear somewhere. Yeah, in this profiles folder, it's here, and you can edit it here. And this actually appears like this in the scene. So to test it, the easiest way to test it would be to go to the game view and add an effect that's very easy to visible. Vignette is a very good example of this. If you add a vignette, it will be very easy to spot. It does not seem to be working, so let's see. I believe yeah. So by default, if you look at this layer, we have not set a layer where we should look for the post-processing objects. So if you set it to everything, it will work, but they give this warning: do not use everything on default. So let's fix that actually and add a new layer. If you select any object and just go to layer, add layer, you will get this. So in user layer 8, let's add a new layer, post processing. Yeah, so that's where the layer has been added. Now we don't need this camera to appear here. We want this post processing volume to appear in that layer. So you just select the object that you want to send to that layer and go to this layer drop down and select it. That's it. Now you go to the camera and you set the post processing layer for this. Oh, sorry, we have to select nothing first, then post processing, and yeah, it works. You can turn on anti-aliasing here if you like, but that's not part of this session. Let's add some effects. So vignette works means the layer is working. Let's remove this. Let's add an effect like this. Now the best way to get reflection is screen reflections. So just when you add it, it will say this effect only works with a deferred rendering path. So you have to change the rendering mode for this. Now here is the warning: deferred rendering does not work on mobile platforms very well, like Android, iOS. So you may not want to use it, but here we don't care. So it take a bit of time to compile everything, and yeah. Now let's get to the post effects object and let's enable this effect, and something has changed. So let's actually set it to lowest one now. Oh yes, it's the game view. Let's look in the scene view, and right now you can't see much. Actually let's try medium. Yeah, you will be able to see more if we add another of this cube. Let's put it here. Yes. Now let's give it a color. Let's create a material. Let's call it red, and we just set the color to red. That's it. Then we apply it to this, and maybe now you can see something. Can you see this red reflection here? Well, that's what the post-processing effect adds, and this is better visible if you make it a bit longer, larger, I guess. And yeah, there you have some basic forms of reflection. Actually the light angle is not very suitable for this. Let's move this light. Oh, actually there is no point of moving a directional light. You have to rotate it to what you want. Yeah, now it's better visible. And let's add another of this. Actually I'm just gonna disable shadows for this, because to show off the effect better. And let's create a new material. I'm gonna call it blue. And you can that did not work. Yeah, and you can again see the blue light from it. And yeah, there you have some kind of reflection. Now this surface is not ideal for reflection, so let's have a better surface. Material reflective, yes, let's call it reflective. Now the reflective surface, let's make it fully metallic and fully smooth. Okay, now you can see the reflections, and this is also the light. So if you, let's bring the camera here. Combine tool, and we rotate it towards this. Let's switch to the game view and you can see the reflection. Yeah, so there you have it, some reflections. So thanks for sticking to the very end. Best of luck for your game jam, and if you have any questions, issues, problems, just join the meet. And thank you. Bye.